My little sister has been able to see everyone's fate since she was a child. A month before my college entrance exams, she predicted I'd be the top scorer in the province. So she messed with fate. She secretly swapped our scores. Surprisingly, I ended up with her fortune-telling ability. She begged me on her knees to switch our fates back. I scoffed, "Too late, dear sister. You're gonna have a disaster in a month." My sister, named Julia, was a famous fortune teller in our town. Not only was she spot on with her predictions, but she was also stunningly beautiful. But I was different. Even though we shared the same parents, I was born with a big birthmark on my face. Though I wasn't much to look at, I was way smarter than most people. So I was always the top student in my class. Despite that, our parents adored Julia because she brought endless wealth to our family. She moved us from a small town to a big city and into a mansion. Once we were living in a mansion, Mom made it clear she disliked me. She treated me like a servant and would yell that I should have died in the womb. Dad didn't care for me either. I remember times he tried to lose me in the snow, stuffing me into snowmen on the roadside. But I was tough and survived every time. When I managed to make it back home, trembling by the fire, Dad would get furious and throw me out again. He even went to Julia to predict when I'd die. But she could never give a clear answer. Over time, I learned to survive in this harsh environment. Julia, with her looks and mystical skills, was a school celebrity. Even though her grades were bad, she boasted like a queen, adored and untouchable. But one day a guy spoke up against her. "Being pretty doesn't feed you. If you're so great, become the top scorer in the province. Bet you won't even score half of what Jane does." Julia was pissed. She couldn't handle the critique. She snapped back, "Just wait, I'll be the top scorer." Then she turned to me, yanked me by my collar, and dragged me to the rooftop. I was trying to study, but she yanked back, letting a flower pot smash onto my foot. Immobilized, she slapped me in the face, venting her earlier frustration. Once she was satisfied, she started calculating her fate with her fingers. Suddenly, her eyes shot open wide as she exclaimed, "Julia 187? She glared at me, then meticulously calculated my fate, Jane 721. She looked at me with malice, then took a small branch she always carried and sliced my wrist with it. Blood trickled down, spelling my name on the ground. She then slashed her own wrist, letting her blood form her name. Mixing our blood with the branch, she stirred our names together. With her actions, a strong wind blew, followed by a heavy rain that lasted just half a minute. When it was over, the name in front of me was Julia, and her name read Jane. Satisfied, she put the branch away and taunted me, "Jane, you live for me. Even if you score the provincial top, it means nothing, so swapping our scores won't change a thing." I was angry for the first time, pushing back, "Julia, why? Isn't what you have enough? Why take my scores too? I have nothing. Surviving in this family is hard enough. Why steal my only achievement? Why are you so heartless?" She just smiled faintly, kicked the pot aside and walked downstairs. Just as despair set in, a vision flashed in my mind of her falling down the stairs. I thought I was daydreaming, but then a sudden scream confirmed it. I think I have Julia's fortune-telling power now. Her scream gathered lots of classmates, eager to help her up. Julia, still with her head held high, leaned on a boy's shoulder. As I stumbled down the stairs, people saw my pathetic state and began to insult me. "Ugly freak, did you push your sister? Not only ugly but a dirty heart too. Disgusting, if not for your grades, even the principal would kick you out." They kept insulting me as they helped Julia back to class. I stood at the door, mimicking Julia's fortune-telling gestures. After 2 minutes, the truth became clear. Julia swapped her smooth-sailing life and unique talent for a number. She didn't even swap her dumb brain, just exchanged for the 3 digits 721 on a test result. I looked at Julia surrounded by classmates and shook my head. What a dramatic life she leads. When I returned to class, my desk was overturned. Half my papers were burned, the rest soaked. My desk looked worse than me. Walking over, Julia kicked out her foot to trip me, but I saw it coming. I swiftly kicked her foot instead, knocking her down. Leaning over, I whispered, "Sis, stay down." Then I stepped over her to pick up my soaked papers. But Julia, never one to listen, jumped up suddenly. Right then, a blood-stained sanitary pad flew onto her face. I looked at her stunned expression and the panicked face of the girl who threw it. I couldn't help but laugh. Told you not to move, sis. Why didn't you listen? I chuckled as I picked up my things. Julia grabbed the tampon and threw it right back at the girl who tossed it at her. Then, without caring about my sarcasm, she headed straight to the bathroom to clean up. When they came back, Julia was carrying a bucket of water. It was so murky that anyone could tell something was added to it. Julia handed it to the guy next to her, telling him to throw it at me. He took it easily. Watching his move, I shook my index finger and said, Jack, your mom only has one breath left. You might make it home in time. Jack didn't get mad, but a bunch of our classmates did. Hey Jane, how come I never noticed before? You really know how to trash talk. Geez, no parents involved, remember? And you're the top student. I ignored them, keeping my gaze cool on Jack. Within a second, he dropped the red bucket and ran out. The mess from the bucket soaked Julia's feet. The yellow gunk splattered on her shoes. She immediately glared at me, not caring about the mess, and dragged me into the bathroom. At the door, I shook her hand off. What's up, sis? Julia grabbed my neck, gritting her teeth. How do you know these things? I looked at her calmly. Before I could speak, her phone rang. It was my dad calling. Hello? Hey Julia, help your dad with these stocks. I put down a big chunk of change. If it pays off, we're set for life. Julia frowned, stayed quiet, and started calculating with her fingers. She took a while. My dad's voice on the other end got worried. Julia, honey, what's up? You're scaring me. Suddenly, she stopped and stared at me wide-eyed. I gave a faint smile. Dad, if you sell now, we can still keep the mansion. Wait 10 minutes and we'll be back in the old shack. He sounded confused. Is that Jane talking? Just as I was about to reply, Julia hung up the phone. She let me go and pulled out a small stick. Told me to cut my wrist. I took it and snapped it in two. Sis, only someone with your IQ would need props. I don't. Julia yelled, then do it now. I shook my head. I can't. Do you really think I want to go back to the life you created for me? Julia, looking panicked, dropped to her knees, but her eyes showed no pleading. Please, sis, give me back my life. I promise I'll stop bullying you. I crouched to lift her chin. Too late, dear sister. You'll have bad luck in a month. I didn't plan on bragging about swapping destinies with Julia. Couldn't be bothered. I refused to believe I would only score 187 on the SATs, even if my fate was altered. So, I kept on grinding like before, sometimes sleeping just 2 hours a night. But every time I did a test, it somehow always ended up 187. My notes would disappear mysteriously. But Julia was different. Even if she slept through mock exams, she'd ace them and top the class with my answers. She forgot she was just another fortune teller's prodigy. Julia strutted over with her top scoring paper, flaunting. Jane, what good is my life to you if you can't accomplish anything? I'm going to shine in these exams, have a bright future. And you? What's fortune telling ever done for you? I don't even care about predicting stuff. Just a footnote in my fabulous life. As if I needed it, she said, looking at me for a reaction. Then snatched my test paper and set it on fire with a lighter. I took a step back, grabbed my backpack and left the classroom. Julia laughed. It's just a little flame. You're scared of that? But as she turned to blow it out, a gust blew through the window. The small flame caught her shirt. Help, I'm on fire. She ran toward me, frantically slapping the flames. I pushed the door shut on her, slung my backpack and headed to the library. She wouldn't die. She just might have a permanent scar from her shoulder to her chest. Checking the time, it was 6 p.m. My parents wouldn't call till 9 to tell me to visit Julia in the hospital. I had 3 hours to study, worked through several practice questions and found that as long as I didn't write my name, or wrote Julia's, my answers counted. No more stuck with 187 legit scores showed. I was over the moon. Blitzed through some English tests. In the hospital room, my dad slapped me to the floor. Blood immediately trickled from my lip. Jane, who gave you the nerve to set your sister on fire? If I don't beat you to death today, I'm not your dad. He raised his hand for another slap. I looked up with a stubborn gaze at him. Hit gently, you might break a bone otherwise. So you'll never be able to pick up chopsticks in your life. To him, that comment seemed like a challenge. My dad's face twisted, eyes widened, and his hand rose quickly before crashing down hard. Ah! His hand hit the wall behind me with a loud crash. I shrugged helplessly. Told you to go easy. You'd better head to the orthopedic on the 3rd floor. It's probably broken. Before he could yell at me more, he ran upstairs clutching his hand. I glanced over at Julia, who was looking at me gloomily from the bed, and forcefully smiled. See, fortune-telling does have its perks. Get out, I don't want to see you. She threw a pillow at me in pain. I picked it up and settled it behind me, and calmly opened the set of test papers I had just finished that afternoon. I can't leave now. If I did, I'd run into Mom with Bob from next door. You've probably seen it a lot, but I can't. I won't taint my eyes with those filthy scenes. I've got studying to do. Oh, by the way, sis, congrats. You've got 18 days till your impending misfortune, I said, looking at Julia. She was visibly freaking out. Wanting to study in peace, I took my backpack and left the room, avoiding hearing her go crazy later. Honestly, without this fortune-telling gift, I used to think I was the odd one out in a perfectly happy family. Turns out, Mom's been cheating, Dad's ruined the family with bad investments, and Julia got knocked up in her freshman year. It's a wonderfully cheerful family. They call me the worst, but really they're the rotten ones. For the peace I needed before the college entrance exams, I took him each aside and threatened them. I told Mom, I know about you and Bob on the balcony and in the kitchen. Besides, did you know his wife's brother is in the mafia? Oh, and don't drive for the next 3 days and don't bug me either. Even without my insight, it's clear whose hands you might die by. I told Dad, still got cash to invest? Isn't this house already mortgaged? Aren't we heavily in debt? If you want a comeback, stay out of my way for now. I'll share the secret after my exams. I told Julia, right now you're destined to fall into manholes, find mouse heads in your food, get drenched in filth using the bathroom, and get slapped shopping. That's my fate. If you want to ace the college entrance exams and win the provincial champion, don't step outside. After my threats, they behaved. Didn't bother me anymore. Even when one day, Julia came home covered in filth, ready to lash out at me, Dad slapped her. Don't push your luck. Want to peacefully live in this mansion? Want to buy clothes and bags? Get to your room and stay there. Julia cried for the first time being hit by Dad, sulking in her room, loud enough for me to hear. I put my book down, walked over to quiet her down. She threw a pillow at me. Jane, are you insane? You're doomed to fail. Why even bother studying? You think this will make them love you? No way. Nobody will ever love you. You're born trash. Your face with that ugly birthmark makes me lose my appetite. I crouched in front of her. I may not score high, but my effort wasn't wasted. Only someone like you would care about those numbers on a transcript. I value the effort, not the score. Congrats, your misfortune is 7 days away. Julia went hysterical, demanding I predict how to avoid it. No escape, just like no matter how hard I try, I'm stuck with 187 points. No way out. In the final 3 days, I locked myself up going through tests. Each time it added up to 721, but no name on top. I was content. At least my efforts weren't in vain. On exam day, my parents got up early to take Julia to school. I was purposely left home. Living in a villa area, with no transport besides private cars, left me stranded without a dime for a ride. I had no choice but to run. Luckily, I came across some cops who drove me to the school. Julia sat in front of me. During exams, she'd crawl up on her desk, dozing off as if it was just another practice test. The proctor repeatedly tried to wake her. I focused on my own exam, hitting around 700 just as predicted. By last period, Julia arrogantly turned in a nearly blank test. The teacher asked, not even writing the essay. Julia shook her head slyly, strutting out. I followed her, reflecting on those 3 years of hard work. Even without my name on the results, it was worth it. I'd already prepped for another round. The next provincial champ was a girl named Jane, scoring 20 points above the previous year's best. Dad planned a celebration at home for Julia's future achievement. Conveniently, it was the day of Julia's unfortunate prophecy. Julia, around divination from a young age, knew how to change her fate. Using joy to override sorrow was her best bet. During the party, Dad walked center stage with Julia, for proudly introducing everyone. This here is my daughter, Julia. Today we're celebrating her being top of the province a bit early. I'm so happy. It hasn't been easy for her, studying until 2 or 3 in the morning. It hurt to watch sometimes, but hard work really does pay off. After he said this, the crowd applauded. Dad handed the mic to Julia. Julia spoke proudly about her dreams for the future. Having a great romance, being the youngest Oscar-winning actress, and having a bright future. Then unexpectedly she looked at me. "Oh, by the way, our Smith family has another daughter. That's my sister, Jane. She didn't do well on her college entrance exams, but she worked hard too. Why don't we let her speak, okay?" I was nervous, not sure why she called me out suddenly. Before I could react, my dad came from the front row and insisted on pulling me over to Julia. Despite resisting, I was pulled along. Looking at Julia's smug face, I suddenly had a bad feeling. I immediately did a little mental calculation. I'd been set up. Just as I wanted to rush off the stage, the giant crystal chandelier creaked above us. No time to think, everyone started fleeing outward. Julie clung to me while the chandelier was about to fall on me. But I couldn't move at all. Julia wasn't holding me that tightly. I just felt glued to the spot. Then the chandelier crashed onto the floor. I bore the full weight, covered in glass shards. Julia had just a scratch on her collarbone. Right before passing out, I heard her whisper in my ear, "I told you you were born to live for me." It took about 2 weeks for me to recover. Mostly superficial injuries, but the worst was the stab Julia gave me on my lower back when everyone was trying to escape. If it weren't for my luck, I might not have made it. I carefully pieced together the whole situation. In about 10 minutes it was clear. Julia wasn't compensating joy with sorrow. She had used me to ward off disaster, setting everything up ahead of time. Even after I took the fall for her, she still stabbed me in the back. Classic Julia. Still as ruthless as ever. As I slowly lowered my hand, I met Julia's triumphant gaze, holding a bright red admission notice. "Jane, I almost forgot, you're a tough one. Even with such heavy injuries, you're still alive. Talk about making it hard to sleep at night." Looking at her, I felt not just hatred, but the urge to make her feel my pain. "Julia, you wanted your fortune-telling ability back, right? I'll return it to you." Julia looked surprised, thinking maybe I was brain damaged from the fall. "Really?" I nodded. "You're right, my fortune-telling isn't doing any good. Keeping it is a waste." Julia tried to hide her excitement. I pulled out a glass shard from under my pillow and took her extended hand. Julia seemed skeptical. "Where's the twig?" "The twig isn't powerful enough for what I need." My eyes were a deep red. Julia grew genuinely scared. She tried to pull away. "Let me go, I don't want this anymore. If you don't let go, I'll tell Dad to hit you. Just let go now." Just as she was about to break free, I slashed her wrist with a swift motion, cutting through her artery, then slashing my wrist next. I used the shard to scrawl our names on the floor, and as the lights flickered, our names switched places. Actually, while studying, I wasn't just reviewing. I also read all the fortune-telling books Julia ever bought. I figured out her fate well before the chandelier fell, calculating she'd use tricks to protect herself, and knew my life would end for real after that fall. So I turned to books for answers. Julia was never that bright. She couldn't grasp all the fortune-telling stuff. But me, all I've ever had was my mind. I found the method quickly, a way for us to swap our souls entirely. Jane's rebirth was truly a rebirth into a phoenix. When I woke up again, I owned Julia's life. I looked at my body wrapped in bandages on the hospital bed. After a moment of disorientation, I accepted my new identity. I raised her hand and waved her arm. After a few seconds of struggle, she finally woke up. Julia blinked slowly, then turned her head, screaming suddenly, "Jane, you beat it. What did you do to me?" She couldn't accept her fate, trying to get up from the bed. But the countless wounds made her lie back down. "Sis, that's what it really means to defy destiny. From now on, you're Jane living a wretched life. I am Julia with a bright future. And the talent for fortune-telling? That's still in my hands." Julia looked at me with rage, as I finally saw clearly how much I hated my own birthmark, sickened by it. I looked in the mirror, seeing fair skin, bright red lips, even a birthmark under my eye, looking so beautiful. Though born from the same mother, we had 2 different lives. The mirror suddenly reflected Dad's face, and I turned around quickly. Dad sat down and poked Julia's body. "Jane, school's over. I respected your wish not to bother you during exams. Where's the secret to success you promised me?" Julia looked at him with eyes full of rage. "Dad, I'm Julia, not Jane. 5 Jane, that bee, she stole my life. Dad, help me." I don't want to be Jane. My dad, a gambling addict, wouldn't believe a word I say. He must think I'm making stuff up. No matter how much I cried, he just slapped me anyway. You dare to lie to me? I must have been out of my mind to listen to you. I don't care. You better tell me how to invest and get rich again. If you can't, our whole family will suffer. So hurry up. He cursed while hitting me. I screamed in pain and then the doctor walked in. Sir, this is a hospital. Please keep it down. She needs to stay for observation for another week. Please go pay the hospital bill. Dad stormed off, leaving me crying. I'm not paying her bills. She acts like she's got it all figured out, let her pay for herself. He punched me one last time before leaving the hospital. I got discharged quickly. As Jane, no one would spend money on me. Today's the start of my school year. Dad drove me to school. Mom, all dressed up, got out with me while Julia struggled with all the luggage, following behind. Mom and Dad fussed over me while Julia, in Jane's skin, trailed behind like a servant. I chuckled bitterly. Life sure has its twists. I remember when I started middle school, things were the same. We were boarding then, and our family wasn't rich yet. We lived in a small town's cottage. Mom and Dad acted like a family with Julia in front of the teachers. They were eager to show off Julia's looks, since she predicted a school contest for the prettiest student with a prize of $2,000. Only I was behind, struggling with everyone's luggage. When asked if I was the only daughter, they barely acknowledged me before steering the conversation back to Julia. During our boarding days, Julia would scold me for boiling water too hot, make me do her homework, and wash her stained underwear. She'd also lead the class in bullying me for my birthmark. My middle school life was as sad as my entire existence. In the second semester of 7th grade, my dad got into stocks. Julia's predictions led our family to a wealthy life. Yet, I was still treated like an ant in our home, not part of their wealth. Suddenly, a loud noise snapped me back. I turned to see Julia tumble down some steps with her suitcases. She seemed scared of being hit again. Hurried to pick them up, bowing and apologizing repeatedly. Sorry. Dad rushed down the steps, not giving her a chance. He slapped her hard. What's the use of you if you can't even hold luggage? Julia covered her face, cringing in fear. I stepped up, pushing her closer to the field. Sis, let's avoid things you need to apologize for. After saying that, I quickly stepped back. Bang! A basketball suddenly slammed towards her. Julia ducked low. A guy playing basketball came over, his voice soft, bending to look at her. Are you okay? I didn't mean it, really didn't see you. She lifted her head slightly. A handsome face. Julia shook her head. I'm fine. I smirked inside. She wouldn't be. I had seen that the ball would hit me, starting a romance leading to marriage. But Julia, to get back at me, would hook up with him our wedding year. He'd believe Julia over me, abusing me while they cheated. So since they're destined, why not let lovebirds meet sooner? By the second year of college, I earned enough money through online fortune telling to buy a house. I bought it in my dream city. After securing it, Dad came asking for money. He owed so much that even after pawning our house and cars, he still couldn't pay it off. I mimicked Julia's bratty tone, yelling at him. What can I do? You know our money came from my fortune telling. I can't do it anymore. Jane won't help us and you're asking me why. Dad's face showed hate, but seeing my fancy outfit, he couldn't help himself. That bag looks pricey. Pawn it for me. When I have money, I'll buy you 10. I instantly fired back. No way. You're too old to be making promises. That bag's all I have left. I've got class soon, so just leave. Then I turned to leave, but he grabbed my sleeve. At least lend me $200 for the cab. We're in the middle of nowhere here. I jerked free. Sorry, can't help. If you can't help me get back up, leave me alone. Thinking back to when they abandoned me before my college entrance exams made me furious. I had already let Julia have my scores. Why wouldn't they let me be happy? Anyway, turns out the saying is true, what goes around comes around. During college, I worked hard using my readings to earn awards. Julia, the state valedictorian with 721 points, no one surpasses her yet. The name isn't mine, but the effort is. After finishing college, I continued to grad school and became a known fortune teller online. Not wanting to disturb roomies, I rented a small apartment to stream. Heading back, I launched the app to do more live readings. 6. So here's the thing, I could tell who this customer was just by her voice. Thanks to the voice changing effect on the software, she couldn't recognize my voice at all. I asked her directly, "So what would you like me to predict, dear customer?" She deliberately lowered her voice. "Streamer, I want to know about my love life." I chuckled. "So you want to hear about your love life even though you're married with 2 daughters? As soon as I said that, the chat went wild. "No way, this streamer is so spot on. Whoa, streamer, can you predict my fortune too? How much for a session? Give me 10 sessions, please." I saw the last comment. "Folks, we charge a flat rate of $8,888. We predict love and money back guarantee if not accurate. Divination rule, predict only, no changing fate. 8888, that's kinda steep but worth it if they nail it. Change fate? Can they really do that? Hey, pay attention." The streamer said no changing fate. Yeah, that means they could, but they won't do it for you. I just hummed. Yeah, I can change it. As soon as I said that, the woman on the call spoke desperately. "Streamer, why not change it? Is it too expensive? Name your price, I'll pay anything, please change my fate. I'm almost at the end of my rope." I didn't respond, but the comments went crazy. What? What's her story? Spill the tea. Cancer? Stomach issues? Those are the usual in stories. Streamer, maybe listen to her story and help her out? She sounds really pitiful. I can't change it. You've brought this on yourself. Come on, I'm being hunted by the mafia. Save me, please. Why do they want to kill you? Silence from the other end. Why, huh? Did you figure it out, streamer? Come on, spill it, don't leave us hanging. The chat was going nuts. Then she seemed to muster the courage, as if ready to face death, and spoke louder. "Because I slept with her husband." No way, you slept with the mob boss's husband? You're hardcore. Wow. The woman on the call hurriedly explained. "But we're truly in love. That's why I wanted to know if we can be together in the future." I paused, calculated on my fingers, then said, "You'll die together." The next second, 2 gunshots rang out in my live stream. No way, did they really die? That accurate, huh? Did she even pay? 8888 is no small change, streamers gotta make a living. Then I ended the stream. Later on, the year I graduated from grad school, Julia showed up bruised all over. Before she even spoke, she knelt down. "Jane, for the sake of us being sisters, help me out. I'm either being beaten by my husband or dad every day. I'm really at my limit. After all these years, haven't you had enough of revenge? Even if it doesn't change our lives, have some mercy on me as your sister. Help me escape this life, please." I shook off her hand. "Think about it, if I were the one kneeling, would you help me?" She froze motionless on the floor. Julia's promising future came at the cost of Jane's barren life. "You cursed me from a young age, this fate is too ingrained to change just like that. Enjoy it, dear sister, you'll live a long life." The end.